This is Rush. This is like some weird deep Rush song. And it's like some mythological war between Bytor and the Snow Dog. And I was playing it last night. I've never heard it before. And then this part came on. Only Rush can pull this shit off. The older I get, the more I like Rush. So this is like the end of the battle. This is like the end of the war. That's the theme today, people. Everything that's happening is the end of the war. Like how I tied that together. So we're going to do some headlines. And as you listen to the headlines and think about the headlines, think about them like as the end of the war. 25-year war. And then we're going to do, I'll take a little musical interlude, and we're going to do Michael Hudson's piece. Michael Hudson is the economist that you've never heard of because he's the person that can explain to you what's happening. And this is the time to, like, you don't need the Wall Street Journal, you don't need Bloomberg, you don't need Paul Krugman and all these losers. And as we go through like the economics of Michael Hudson, I want you to think about like the end of war. You know, like the whole thing I do, the Neo-Confederacy, end of Gone with the Wind, Back to Terra, plant turnips in the front yard and all that. It happened. So, like, only Rush could make this work. It's like an 8-minute song about Bytor and the Snow Dog, whatever the fuck that is. Some mythological thing. It's like Lord of the Rings or something. Okay, let's do we're going to do some headlines real quick. The most important headline in the world is the interest rates. And since the war, and I've posted a couple little notes, you can take a look at them. Since the war, across the board, from the 30-year, which is a long bond, that's the most volatile. The bigger the change in interest rates, the 30-year moves the most. 10-year is sometimes called the bellwether bond. It's what mortgages are based on. And then the 5-year, when you look across them, I hadn't looked at this for a long time. I can't even believe that the 5-year is bottomed right before the war, the Iran war. I'm using the word war to refer to the Iran war and also the whole war on terror. The Iran war is sort of like the last couple battles. Okay, so roughly speaking, the 5-year was at 3.5%, and a couple days ago it was at 4.4. It's almost up 1% since the beginning of the Iran war. In finance, I can't even explain it to you, like, this is massive, destructive. See, that interest rate, the U.S. Treasury rates, are what they're used to base the cash flow analysis of everything from OpenAI to your car payment on your F-150 pickup truck. Okay? Everything is based on U.S. Treasury rates. And the basic theme that I've tried to lay out to you is when you lose a war, you lose your interest rates. Okay? So let's hold the thought. Then, Linda, we go to this thing. I posted it late last night. Okay, Thomas Massie lost because he said, I tried to make a phone call to concede the election, but I couldn't get through to Tel Aviv. So the whole thing about Israel and Mary Madelson, that's just now in popular culture, right? I lost 84,000 followers, whatever it was, because I said the Israeli lobby has a lot of influence over social media. Now, a sitting congressman jokes about Tel Aviv controlling the fucking elections. This is where we are in this war on terror thing. Okay. Now, yesterday, I don't know if you saw it, and the head lawyer for the U.S. Treasury resigned. They made a settlement between the Trump administration, the Trump family, the IRS, and the Department of Justice that Trump could never be audited or investigated again for the rest of his life. This is corruption on a scale that I don't even know what you'd point to in American history. Maybe the Andrew Johnson, not Jackson Johnson, the one that followed Lincoln, who was almost impeached. He thought he had Grant's backing and he didn't. That's why he was almost impeached, blah, blah, blah. But anyways, this is just gangsterism everywhere you look, people. At the end of the war, you're starting to see a kind of like corruption of like, let's just see how much everybody can steal. Everywhere you look. Everybody knows it's going down. It's like the Leonard Cohen song. Everybody knows the game is rigged and the bad guys won, however that song goes. Remember the admiral, the head of the U.S. Navy, resigned like 10 days into the war with Iran? This is the same theme everywhere you look, and what you're seeing is corruption. In the Quran, it says at the end times, there'll be let loose a corruption. Book of Revelation, if you want to go there, if you want to take that angle on it. But what I would have you look at right now is, in my career, 25 years in finance, Enron, Lehman Brothers, WorldCom, Bernie Madoff to some extent, you always see the head people leave. The chief financial officer leaves, and everybody goes, what the fuck? That is happening to the US government. That is happening to OpenAI. Let's go into that for a minute. In other words, don't just think of the almost 1% move in interest rates as an inflation thing, oil's at 150, blah, blah, blah. Think of it in terms of corruption. In other words, Lehman Brothers gets in a bad way. My parents grew up over an hour away where Westinghouse was. It was one of the biggest industrial companies in the world. It didn't die because it didn't know how to make nuclear power plants anymore. It died because of corruption. The old white men who ran the fucking thing just hoard the place out. It's that simple. And since the mid 90s, late 80s, early 90s, took like 10, 15 years, they just dispersed the whole thing. The exact same story with Jack Welch and GE. He just hoarded the place out. He thought he was going to become Warren Buffett and he was going to run Berkshire Hathaway instead of running a big industrial company. You got rid of all the fucking engineers in Schenectady. They didn't have any. It was a big holding company, and he made all these acquisitions and he doctored the numbers. Remember, if you're my age, remember GE beat earnings by a penny for every quarter for year after year after year. That's illegal. They just had the trial about OpenAI. Elon Musk testified. The CEO, I think it was the CEO of Microsoft, testified. Under oath, Microsoft took OpenAI under its wing, or almost like in receivership, about 6 to 9 months ago. Under oath, the CEO described the relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI as, quote, amateur city. Sam Altman makes $76,000 a year as the CEO of OpenAI. He has no equity. He was fired for lying. Board members, staff members, other executives, everybody fired this fucking guy. Okay? They brought him back because everybody in popular culture went, what's going on with OpenAI if they fired the CEO? See, what I'm getting at is in Enron, WorldCom, Westinghouse, GE, when someone leaves, the system goes, Oh, that's fucked up. What are we going to do about that? It needs restructured, or somebody's going to make a big invest. Now they leave and they come back. The people in charge of the corruption that are supposed to be policing the corruption, such as the SEC, they allow a guy who was fired for lying. He's a fiduciary. Okay. They allow him to come back and they sort of play this game like Sam Altman's running OpenAI. He's not. He's like the Allstate man. He's just a PR figure. So now all the people internal and external, including Microsoft, are like, who's running this fucking thing? And they let him come back, and this is all building up to an IPO at $1 trillion. Hold on. Sam Altman's net worth has nothing to do, it's 3.3 billion or something like that, has nothing to do with OpenAI. It's all the other startups that he's in control of that have made contracts for tens of billions of dollars of the money that's in OpenAI. When I was started as a stockbroker, this was like, I mean, there's always bad things that go on, but like this just brazen, everybody can just do whatever the fuck they want. From Trump to Sam Altman, anything fucking goes. And I'm telling you, when you look at these interest rates go up because the inflation rate came out at 3.8, so all the bond prices have to get above that. So there's a positive return above the rate of inflation, blah, 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 like finance 101. No. That's not what you should be afraid of. You should be afraid of the rest of the world just looking at the United States and just going, no, we're done. We're done. You kill girls, you rape them, you eat children. Your whole fucking system is corruption. To even include a nice rural area in Tennessee where $27 million from the Jewish lobby, we're allowed to call it the Jewish lobby now because it's just sort of the cat's out of the bag. And the guy who loses says, yeah, I couldn't get on the phone with Tel Aviv. Our system is so fucking corrupt. There's nobody to police it. It's not even like The Shield and like Vic Mackey does some edgy shit to keep people from murdering each other on the streets. This is like they just turn. I mean, remember, it was 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, the protests in Colombia were put down not by the mayor or the governor or the chief of police, but by 4 billionaire Zionist Jews on Snapchat. Called the fucking head of the police and said, send the SWAT team to the green in Colombia. Everywhere you look in America, there's nothing but corruption. It's like I used to do this thing where I'd say it's going to be like Atlanta at the end of the war. Imagine what it was like in Atlanta. You can go watch Gone with the Wind and you can see it. Everybody's running around stealing, dragging women out by their hair. What's her name gets in the thing and Rhett Butler jumps in the wagon with her to save her and get her away from that's where you are, people. Financially, that's where you are. I hope it doesn't get worse on the street, so to speak. The most terrifying thing you can see right now in the financial system is corruption. It's not inflation. That's old news. And if they reopen the straits or whatever, and the ships start to pass in the night and all that, the corruption's not going to go away. 73% of the, this was on the Drudge Report, rate the economy poor. 42 U.S. aircraft were shot down by Iran during the war. Didn't even make it to MSNBC. Wheat crop could be the worst since 72. That was one of the factors in the 1970s that nobody talks about. It was both the oil embargo and there was several really weak harvests during the 1970s. inflation is not controlled, and we're going to get into Michael Hudson. It's going to be a little bit long-winded, and I'm going to like sort of sound like a professor, like talking about something, but you're just going to have to suck it up. If you don't want to listen to it, that's fine. Just click off. But you're going to hear an explanation of the Fed and interest rates and inflation and oil in the 1970s, like something you've never heard it explained quite like you're going to hear it. And here's the word of the day. Our system is all based on credit. And as JP Morgan said in his testimony in front of the Pareto Commission, I think it was a congressional, both Senate and House commission to investigate what caused the Depression. He somewhat famously like slammed his fist on the table and said, credit is character. And I would ask you, like, point to somebody in American popular culture that has any character. Anyone. Harry Styles, fucking Bruce Springsteen, anybody. It's really, it's the, pun intended, it's the commodity that's getting scarce. MTG said, oh, they threatened me and my family. Fuck it. I'm running away with my boyfriend to Costa Rica. She was the most outspoken person with integrity. We're not even talking about the Epstein thing anymore. We've moved beyond that. They're eating and raping the kids, but let's all calm down and move beyond that to the $1 trillion IPO of OpenAI, which if the SEC approves that thing the way it is, it's going to wreck the American system forever. All they have to do is go, no, you're not going to IPO a $1 trillion company with a guy that doesn't even have any equity in it and has tens of billions of dollars in contracts with non-third party providers. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Where the fuck is Warren Buffett? Where is anybody? Where's Jamie Dimon? Where is anybody in finance addressing this? There's weirdos like me and Quoth the Raven and like a dozen other people that go into this, but because it's Sam Altman and Elon Musk and Microsoft, we can't really, I mean, the CEO of Microsoft, just a reminder, Microsoft sort of took over OpenAI about 9 months ago and owned 20 to 25% of it with this weird clause that said they could just step away from it if it achieved AGI. And now we all know that AGI is bullshit. AGI is this idea that they're going to like build a demon with its own consciousness, as Tim Dillon would say. All right, so let's go. Okay. Now we're going to get into Michael Hudson. He's from the University of Missouri at St. Louis. He is, I think, the PhD advisor and mentor of Stephanie Kelton, who you may know her as the author of The Deficit Myth, the pioneer thinker of what's called modern monetary theory, who's now at Stony Brook University. She was also Bernie Sanders' lead advisor when he ran in 2016. And I think he ran 4 years before that too. And I think she was the lead advisor in both campaigns. You should know that because whenever Bernie Sanders stands up and says, like, we need universal health care or something like that, everybody says, where's the money going to come from? And they go, we're going to print it. We're going to just create money. Like she literally goes like, Stephanie Kelton like goes on MSNBC. Think about this, like, not Bernie Madoff. Ben Bernanke went on 60 Minutes and said, we're just going to print money. Remember? And then I think Powell did much the same thing. Janet Yellen said when they were dropping 100,000 metric tons of bombs on Gaza, she said there's lots of money for the war in Gaza and the war in Ukraine. So it's sort of like everybody's printing money now. So just hold the thought. The difference is what's going to be done with the money. So the conservatives believe that just the private equity financial capitalism, as he calls it, should just be allowed to do whatever they want. The left, if you want to call it that, the MMT, Stephanie Kelton, Bernie Sanders people, everybody comes back and says, this is a greenback, right? Everybody comes back and says, well, this is $1, $5 in this case, and we can make these things. Hold the thought. We never talk like this, but do you understand? You can go watch on TikTok. It's called Building Berkshire. And Warren Buffett, this is what's really interesting about Warren Buffett. He has one of these stadiums in Omaha. What they call it, the Woodstock of capitalism. And he's explaining to his shareholders why he wants to issue and he wants them to vote for it, a preferred stock, which is like a sort of a stock bond combination. It has a coupon like a bond, but it's a stock, and then frequently they can convert and so forth. But he's nice enough to sit there, worth $80 billion at the time or whatever it is, and explain to the lay people why he needs to issue this bond. They're going to buy an insurance company or something like that. But hold on. Do you understand how that works? Charlie puts some paperwork together and they issue this preferred stock, and tens of billions of dollars of these things go into the checking account in Omaha, Nebraska. For what? Whatever Warren Buffett wants to fucking do with it. Okay, you vibing with me? Like this isn't like a finance seminar. This is just like a moment of like the weirdness of money. Okay? As I like to say, the only time in the Bible that Christ gets angry was with the money changers. This guy, Michael Hudson, I like to say, Assistant Treasury Secretary Paul Craig Roberts said, this is the most important economist in America. Paul Craig Roberts is literally the intellectual father of the Reagan Revolution, also known as the supply side revolution. It's not Laffer. It's Paul Craig Roberts. Paul Craig Roberts says that Michael Hudson, someone you've never seen on TV and never will. And here's why. Our system isn't based on capital. Our system is based on credit. And that took me probably 15 years to really understand. In other words, when they do this OpenAI IPO, if it goes through, there's not $1 trillion of anything anywhere associated with OpenAI. It's a completely fictitious number. It's just like Warren Buffett standing there and say, we're going to issue $50 billion worth of a preferred stock, and you're going to unload your checking account and give it to me. Feeling me? Now they're going to do this on $1 trillion basis for this company that has revenue of like, I don't know, 40 billion or something, and is getting beat by Anthropic and Zvek and DeepSeek and all these Chinese open source things. There's no capital there. Okay. This is just like when they tee it up, it'll probably be Goldman Sachs or something like that. They'll like just credit the accounts, meaning all the brokerage firms will have this OpenAI thing that starts trading one morning, right? And Sam Altman will probably go up and go ding, 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 ding. But the checking account has nothing. It's not that it has nothing in it, but like all this money will just flood in, and they'll probably sell 10 or 20% of the company or something like that. And they'll go, look, see, it's worth $1 trillion. And all of us people walking down the street will say like, OpenAI is worth as much as like all the oil and gas in Russia. Okay, so it's entitled, it's a little bit long. You can go look at it yourself. I would suggest if you have anybody who really wants to understand economics and finance, if you can't plow through this, you don't understand economics and finance, and you never will. Rising rates, oil shock, and the debt collapse threaten a global depression. The headline is The Crisis Finance Capitalism Can't Escape. See, finance capitalism is not based on capital, it's based on credit. Okay. How did the myth of interest rates rising in response to price inflation begin? In other words, philosophically, he dismisses the whole thing you've heard all your life on CNBC. The Fed's data dependent and they're going to tweak interest rates and blah, blah, blah. He just throws that right out the fucking window. The moral rationalization is to protect the purchasing power of creditor claims on debtors as measured by the purchasing power of debt claims over consumer prices. I know that's a really hard sentence to take in. And then he goes back into the 18th century. He says the pretense is that creditors use their interest receipts to buy goods and services. In other words, the shareholders of JP Morgan take all the interest that they earn and they go and spend money in New York City, and that's what makes the world go round. But already in the 18th century, critics of debt financing recognized that bondholders recycle most of their money back into new loans. When they do spend part of their interest income into the real non-financial economy, what he's getting at is America is just a financial economy. It doesn't even have any connection to the real world until it got hit over the head by the proverbial two before, like the mule in the field, by $150 oil. Raising interest rates to slow employment and keep wages low, right? This is the traditional thing. Well, we're seeing a little blip of inflation. The Fed stands data dependent, and they're bringing in this guy Warsh to take the fucking short-term interest rates down to like 1%. Well, and these are the conservatives doing this, right? Mitch McConnell, there's no money for that. They're about to take interest rates down to like 2, 1%, maybe zero. Well, the oil prices are at 150. The damage has already been done to the oil and gas and fertilizer and the crop fields, right? So he's playing with this and saying, what is really going on? The most recent 20th century logic is that Paul Volcker, when he increased interest rates to over 20% of the at the end of the Carter administration, he saw wages rising as a result of the Vietnam War, guns and butter fiscal policy. That's how I always explain it. The inflation of the 70s came from the Vietnam War, called military Keynesian in times when the aim was to increase the profits, investment, and employment. Volcker, formerly of Chase Manhattan banker, wanted to increase unemployment so as to keep wages from rising further. He succeeded in creating a crash as bank interest rates rose 20%. So that's the thing we all walk around and talk about is the Federal Reserve's job is to stomp on the economy when inflation, that inflation is just because workers want more money. So fuck them. We'll raise interest rates. It'll create this, as he says later, like this pool of unemployed people will hold wages. Well, the minimum fucking wage is already 7%. It's where I worked like in a moving company when I was at Yale. I made $6.60. I could buy cheap beer and cheap hamburger. That was 30 years ago. The minimum wage, which would have bought cheap beer and cheap hamburger 30 years ago, is now still the fucking minimum wage. But now the situation is so bad that they have to lower interest rates while the oil going through the Sea of Oman is $150 a barrel. Governments lower interest rates mainly to increase debt leverage prices for financial wealth. They got a guy from a fucking hedge fund company called Druckenmiller, called Duquesne Capital, to run the Fed because the financial assets are so fucked that they have to lower the short-term interest rates. Well, I've put the graphs up. You can go look at them yourself. Look at the 5-year. Look at the 10-year. Look at the 30-year. Those rates are blasting off like this because of the inflation. And they're going to fucking lower it. What he's trying to explain to you has nothing to do with workers or supply and demand. It's the fucking private equity guys and the hedge fund guys have a whole bunch of financial assets that are fucked. See how this goes back into my corruption argument? Obama's bank bailout and ZERP has left the U.S. economy debt leveraged. When Obama walked into the White House, we had $55 trillion in total credit market debt. Now it's 105. So the math is just, I think it was Carl Sagan said in the middle of the great financial crisis, I don't know why people keep using the word astronomical. We don't use the word trillions very often in astronomy. We use the word billions all the time. The only people who use the word trillions are in American finance. The result of the Obama bank bailout, quote, was the greatest bond market boom in history, but not a boom for industry and labor. A K-shaped U.S. economy saw sharply rising wealth for the 1%, but the industrial economy has continued to suffer its long decline as wages and industrial profits are being spent on finance, insurance, and real estate. And then he points out, and health insurance, because they privatized this thing and when they called it Obamacare to make it sound it was left wing. Dude, this guy, this is like the Nick Saban of economics. It also means that such companies will not be able to meet their scheduled debt service obligations to their bondholders and bankers, not to speak of needing to stop their stock buyback programs, which have been running at $1 trillion a year for 20 fucking years. This is what happens in a depression. And he's historically absolutely right on the money. They had share buybacks during the 20s. They had corporations lending money into what's called call money to fuel the margin debt. In other words, Ford Motor Company was taking their money out of their checking account, sending it to New York so that the Shoeshine Boy, which famously did Joe Kennedy's shoes, and Joe, if you've never heard the story before, Joe Kennedy, about 6 months before the crash, I think it was may even been like a month before the crash, was getting his shoe shine, and he was exchanging stock ideas with the Shoeshine Boy. And he just intuitively, mathematically had a flash, went back to like his little family office. I think Joe Kennedy was a bank president at age 24 when he graduated from Harvard. Went back into his office and sold fucking everything and bought T-bills like Warren Buffett is right now. Just to remind, corporations were buying their stock and then lending their capital to the speculators in the stock market. And then when this thing collapsed, Congress passed a law and said no more stock buybacks. Rising interest rates are an untenable solution to today's imminent depression. The big question that must be asked is how long the U.S. economy can sustain long-term interest rates over 5% for the 30-year, 4.6% for the 10, and 7% for home mortgage loans. Many loans for commercial real estate and also private equity are soon coming due to be rolled over. How can these debts be refinanced at the same time that they are as rates are looming? A new construction and property sales will be constrained by the inability of new borrowers to pay the higher carrying charges for homes and property. See, if you break through the first couple of things, like it all starts to fall in place, what he's explaining to us. The government will try to do what it usually does, bail out the financial sector, not the real economy. Literally, Larry Summers, Obama's at the head of the table. Larry Summers is here, and some Midwestern New Dealer from like Iowa or something, I forget her name, and right at the height of the 2008 crisis she said, why don't we do a new deal? In other words, interest rates back then collapsed and the government could therefore spend a whole bunch. And Larry Summers says, no, we're just going to bail out the banks. Robert Rubin said, fuck it. We won't mark anything to market anymore. In other words, the value of all the properties on the bank balance sheets will just be fictitious. And here we are 20 years later, not quite 20. The whole fucking thing is blowing apart, just like Mark Faber and Jim Rogers said. It's all going wrong all at the same time. How should the West react to such a problem if we lived in an ideal world? This is an old age solution to mitigate an economic crisis from resulting from interruptions in harvest, as is applicable to today's interruption of the world's energy trade. But that solution is not one that has become part of the Western civilization's way of coping with rising debts. Now, this is a very published professor. He wrote the book in 1971 called Superimperialism, which perfectly lays out how the US dollar was going to become the petrodollar, the currency of massive deficits, the reserve currency, the whole thing. He wrote it 6 months after we went off the gold standard. He explained the next 50 years of finance capitalism the same year it happened. It started. You can see I like this guy. So he explains how Hammurabi ruled over Mesopotamia in 1750 BC. And when there was a drought, what they would do is they would just nullify all the debts. I have described all this and forgive them their debts in a book called Temples of Enterprise. This is Hudson's life's work. You never hear about this guy. You're not allowed to hear about him. Prospects for today's U.S. and foreign economies in the face of the oil crisis. Today's financial markets seem to expect the Federal Reserve to follow its usual knee-jerk reaction to rising consumer prices by raising interest rates, as noted above. This is supposed to slow the economy and create a, quote, reserve army of the unemployed, to keep wages down by causing economic distress. But the U.S. economy is not in a boom or even thriving. The Fed even announced since Trump took office, there's no new job gains. There's no jobs under Trump. Doesn't take any jobs to fucking bulldoze Texas and build data centers. It and other economies are already in distress, I mean, in the United States, as a result of the looming oil and energy crisis. In addition to companies scaling back their production, commercial real estate and homeowners face real estate mortgages falling due. Rising interest rates will push the cost of refinancing these mortgages and other debts beyond the ability of the debtors to pay out their falling income. The result threatens, I'm going to read 3 paragraphs here. The result threatens to be a vast transfer of property from debtors to creditors. In other words, we're going to redo 2008 like 20-fold. The United States and Western Europe may experience something like Asian countries did before the currency crisis of 97-98. That would be a bonanza for vulture funds to sweep in and acquire real estate and companies at distressed prices. This is why they keep talking about real world assets, people. They're going to blow up the economy. This is why you hear things like they're going to open up like national parks to logging. The Trump gangster oligarch thing is just going to rape the whole fucking continent. Nobody is suggesting a Babylonian solution to suspending debt service for economies, I am, that are unable to pay on the economy-wide scale. The West's creditor-oriented legal systems call for a transfer of property ownership as banks and bondholders take over collateral that has been pledged for debt and property that debtors are forced to sell. Why the fuck do you think that they let those things happen with China, with the farmers? The farmers in Arkansas with 4,000 and 8,000 acres, they're going to go tits up. Who do you think's going to end up with that fucking land? Much of the collateral consists of claims on other companies throughout the economy, so the crisis will engulf the entire social and political system. This is what was threatened back in 08 and 09 when the junk mortgage and bank fraud crisis led to the collapse of real estate prices. But the economy's Ponzi scheme of increasing wealth by debt leveraging by supplying new credit has reached the fucking limit. We can now see that the long upsweep since 1945 that seemed to be a series of self-correcting business cycles has been a failed finance capitalist detour from industrial capitalism that has no automatic self-correcting market forces. Okay, just comment. The solution must come from outside the market system, and that is something that neither academic economics nor the public relations ideology of free markets, meaning unregulated, privatized economy, Thatcher, Reagan, Milton Friedman style, have recognized. I threw the Milton Friedman in there. The future will call for thinking about the unthinkable. It requires recognition that debts that can't be paid won't be. I'm telling you right now, people, everything you've heard for the last fucking year, 5 years, is absolute bullshit to those last 2 or 3 things. And that's what I've been trying to do. The whole Bruno thing, the Gone with the Wind, Neo-Confederacy. Let's do the Neo-Confederacy thing. How would the fucking people of Tennessee not vote for Massey? He says, I vote for Republicans 91% of the time. The only time I don't vote for him is with the pedophiles and the Israelis. And still they voted against him in the primary. The Republicans in Tennessee voted against him by 10 percentage points because they want to recreate the antebellum South. They want to recreate not just a financial debt situation, but slavery. And what he's saying is the math is done. There's no more math for this, right? It's like I like to say when I make content, Stevie Nicks went in and said, there's something wrong with my nose. And the doctor came back and said, yes, Stevie, you have a bacterial infection and it's a couple millimeters from your brain from doing so much cocaine. And if you don't stop, you're going to be dead. So you're going to stop doing cocaine one way or the other. That's the fucking story of Stevie Nicks on cocaine. That's where we are. We're at the Stevie Nicks moment. Now, there's nobody who will stand up and say, why don't we just reduce all student loans to like 20 grand or something, any sort of debt forgiveness. This is why he talks about like Hammurabi and shit. Now what they're going to do, we're not going to go back to Jim Rogers and Mark Faber and go, fuck, we sort of fucked that up a little bit. Maybe we should do something. In other words, they said when the debt got too high in 2008, these are financial guys. Mark Faber and Jim Rogers are red meat eaten, dyed in the wool capitalists. But they said if the fucking debt's too high, the debt has to come down. You let the thing burn off and start over. No. We didn't do that, right? Obama went out on March 15th. The S&P 500 was at 666 because they have a sense of humor and said, I'll bet if you ask Warren Buffett right now, this is a great time to buy stocks. And they ran that son of a bitch right back up. And now it's at 105. And our kids have fucking their noses pierced and their tattoos up their neck and their hair is blue and purple. And they're turning into barbarians because it's what's your Roman Empire? And Trump and his fucking gaggle of gangsters are going to steal everything. The BLM land, the national parks, the oil that's off limits, which I'm for most of that. Everything they can fucking get there. In other words, we're now not going to go into a financial capitalism thing that's going to unwind. We're just going to go all the fucking way with it and go back to the antebellum South. He doesn't even say this, but I'm saying this. Where there's people who own the plantation and there's slaves. And who's going to offset this? AO-fucking-C? There's nobody in the system with enough gravitas to even touch this. I'm telling you, it took me 15 years to understand that essay because I was a stockbroker. If you talk like that and you work for Merrill Lynch or Stifel Nicholas or any of these fucking places, you will be fired in 7 fucking minutes. They send 2 guys into your office who grab your elbows and walk you out the door like you're a criminal, turn off your computer, and then give your fucking accounts to you've worked 10 years to build up to the fucking people around them. That's why there's nobody in the system that has any fucking idea what's going on. They're all going like, well, the Fed was going to cut. What they fucking think is they heard this Warsh guy in Moran, the Moran papers, and if you fuck around with us, we're just not going to pay you interest. We might even default. Like Norway, if you start selling our bonds, or Pakistan or something, we'll just send you an IOU. We're going to give you that money back in 100 years. This is in the documents. The U.S. Treasury is being run like gangsters. So they bring this guy in from Duquesne Capital who says, yeah, we're just gonna run the rates down to the natural rate of I'm gonna unpack this a little bit more. I know this is like a little bit much to all take in at one time. I'm telling you, this is a 10, 15, 20-year thing to understand this, because you have to unpack the hours and hours and hours of bullshit that you've heard on CNBC. Well, Warsh is going to come in and lower interest rates. We don't have to worry about the $4.4 trillion in private equity credit that's bound up like Elvis's ass that can't be paid or rolled over or anything. So they're going to put it in fucking tokens on the blockchain and put it in your 401k because there's nowhere else to sell it to. They're going to use, every time you see something going on now on television or Trump or this, that, the other thing, don't think left, right, neo-fascism and all that MSNBC stuff. It's just theft. Everybody's just going to steal whatever the fuck they can. Now, as I like to point out, during the Depression, and Michael Hudson talks like this all the time, he's fluent in it. But what do you think the Mellon family and the Morgans did during the bottom of the Depression? When asset prices go down 80, 90%, when a steel mill, U.S. Steel had already been made and it was like 80% of the market or whatever, but a lonely steel mill somewhere, which had nobody working in it, was trading at 10 cents on the dollar. Well, the oligarchs can just come in and just suck that up. 1/5 of Mississippi was sold one Saturday morning. And then what happened? Shotguns. Literally, the fucking farmers would go to the auctions with shotguns and all stand there. And someone standing beside Bob, who's about to lose his farm, would raise his hand for some nominal number. And everybody would look at anybody else who thought of standing there with their shotgun in their hand and says, anybody else want to bid? And that brought that whole fucking thing to an end. This is where the fuck we are, people. This is what this is. There's no, the Fed stands that. The financial people that you see everywhere, right, who run our system, they thought they were going to bring Warsh in and cram down the short-term interest rates, and that would bring down the long-term rates. Most people in finance think that the Fed can control the whole thing. Moran said we won't even pay, we'll default. We just won't pay the fucking interest. And thank you for staying so long and looking at this. Here's the graph that got me the most. And then we'll go back to buy Tor and the Snow Dog or something. We need a little. It doesn't show up very well on this thing. But here's the 5 years since the beginning of the war. Okay, and I'll just throw the numbers out. Imagine you walked into a bank March 1 and said, hi, Bob. Yeah, I have a $100,000 CD I need to roll over. What do I get for 5 years? Which is relatively long in bank CD world. So, John, today we're looking at 3.6, 3.5 to 3.6. Okay, let me think about it. Then comes in 2 days ago. Yep, I'm ready to do. Well, it's a little bit more. Really? What do I get now? Well, as of Friday, you get 4.4. Why is the interest rate up almost 1% in 6 weeks? Okay, back to Jim Rogers and Mark Faber. Here's the best quote in all of economics. It's Mark Faber who said, "Doesn't matter what the system is, but there has to be a system. Our system is blowing apart." Our system is blowing apart at the US Treasury, military, intelligence, OpenAI, SEC. It's all fucking corruption because the numbers don't work. There's no way to make the numbers work. Our kids can't even afford a fucking hamburger. Here's what's going to happen in the next. I'm not the only guy on the internet that's going to tell you this. We're going to default, people. Gen Z. Did you see these videos of the AI bullshit? There was Benito, what's his name, Bennett Schmidt or whatever, the CEO. I think spoke at Stanford. I think I saw 4 or 5 videos of these people giving these addresses, and they're like, the brave new world, like, go forth and live your dreams, and AI is coming. And every time they said AI is coming, the whole crowd, these are the people who are supposed to adopt AI, were like, boo, fuck you. No. Where is OpenAI going to get all of its revenue from? But it's worth $1 trillion. It's the fastest growing technology of all time. It's the hyperscalers. They're putting trillions of dollars into it. Where's the revenue going to? No one has an answer for where the revenue is going to come from. Look, people, there are people on the earth who know what's going on. Okay. The people you see on TV are placed there so that you don't know what the fuck is going on. Do you ever hear BlackRock say, yeah, maybe we should invest $50 billion into Black Angus cattle? And no, they're going to blow the whole thing wide the fuck open and just steal everything they can. Land, cattle, real estate, technology companies, server farms, whatever. They know it's coming. They know it's coming. And tweak. What do you think? I'll leave you with this. The Moran paper says that ultimately this is the whole Trump administration is just going to crush the dollar. This was even without the Iran war as part of the calculations. Fuck it. If the dollar goes down 40%, it goes down. You mean like they're going to let like an inflationary depression happen? That's right. You're talking like grapes of wrath as a fucking business model. That's right. They're going to grapes of wrath the economy.